Welcome, everyone. In the Todd Family part of your day, we always greatly appreciate it. If you jump on here live here on this late Sunday evening, if you're on the East Coast, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section down below. Make sure to give the video a like, a thumbs up. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so and share the video on all social media platforms. I apologize for coming on here so late tonight, but tonight's show is going to be a little bit different than what I normally do on Saturday nights or Sunday afternoons during college football season, and that is normally I come on here and we just recap all of the somewhat competitive or somewhat meaningful college football games. Thank you, Jacob. It was good to see you there. As always, I had a wrestling show last night and a wrestling show tonight, and I want to talk more about those coming up later on in the week. I also want to talk about Survivor Series, which was earlier tonight, coming up sometime later on this week. And I do want to talk about all of the meaningful or somewhat meaningful college football games from yesterday and today, sometime later on in the week. But tonight, I want to do something I have not done yet since I've had the channel, so I thought, why not do it this year just to be different? And it's one of the reasons why I'm on here so late. One of the reasons was a couple of the teams that are on my list played a Saturday night, late night game, so I had to make sure their game was done. The other reason is there are three teams that I'm forgetting, and I honestly don't know who they are. So if you're watching this either currently or later on and you know what teams they are, please feel free to let me know. Hey there, Y22, glad to have you here. Hey there, Gamer Play, glad to have you here. And hey there, Hunter, glad to have you here. And Dominic, have you here as well. I think it's the first time I've seen any of y'all's name in the comment section. If it's y'all's first time being here for whatever reason, made you stop by the channel tonight, thank you for being here. And feel free to give the video a like, a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel. And Dominic, believe it or not, I don't watch many movies. I've probably in my whole life seen 80, maybe. But out of all the ones that I've watched, my favorite one is probably either Ski Patrol, which is an old movie I watched for the first time when I was probably 8, and it was old back then. So it's got to be late 80s, early 90s movie. But I like Ski Patrol. I like Big. And I love the Home Alone movies. And I love the Saw movies. But in general, I watch 2 movies a year, maybe. I'm just not a movie watcher. Never have been. But I do appreciate the question. And Hunter, I thought it was your first time being here. And Johnny, I'm not sure what you're quitting. Hopefully it's smoking or drinking. If not, I'm not sure what it is, but good luck to you. Whatever it is. Tonight I want to recap my early season predictions I did in college football of the 17 that I can remember. And I'm almost positive that when I got done doing this, right before the season started, I told everybody how many teams I had, and it was 20. But I have spent the last 20 minutes before I started the video trying to figure out who it was, because I don't write any of this stuff down. I go by memorization. And I've got 17, and there's 3 that I just cannot think of. So I thought it'd be fun to come on here and talk about how many games or teams I got exactly right with their record and how many teams I missed. And the ones I missed, did I miss them in a good way or a bad way for the team? Because obviously if it's the team and I pick you to win 5 games and you win 6, well then I missed you in a good way. But if I picked your team to win 7 games and they won 5, well then it was in a bad way. Hey there, Ashton. Glad to have you here. Hunter, I loved Home Alone and Home Alone 2, and I watch them every year at Christmas time, have for 30 years and won't change. But after the first two, and they changed Robbers and they changed Kevin, it just wasn't as good. I think they made five altogether, but don't quote me on that. But I believe they made five altogether. But here's the 17 teams that I've got that I could remember, and I'm almost positive there's 20, but I just do not recall who they were. Iowa, my prediction for Iowa was 8-4, and Iowa went 8-4. My prediction for Texas Tech was 11-1, and Texas Tech went 11-1. And then for Michigan, I picked them to go 9-3, and they went 9-3. So the first three teams I've got, I was exactly right on their record. Now we got Kansas State. And if you recall, I picked Kansas State. Hey there, Rex. Glad to have you here. I picked Kansas State to go 8-4. And I think I explained in the video why I picked them 8-4. And it was because I've always been a big fan of their head coach, Chris Kleiman. But the Avery Johnson experience, for whatever reason, didn't work out. If you recall, they pretty much ran off Will Howard. They told Will Howard, hey, you can stay if you want to, but, we're going to go with Avery at quarterback. We think he's better. So Will Howard leaves, and he goes to Ohio State last year and wins the national championship. But Avery Johnson is a much better runner than he is a thrower. So I picked Kansas State to go 8-4, and I said I've got them going 8-4 because, their best offensive play is the quarterback run play, whether it's a draw, RPO, whatever, it's their best play. And before the season started, Chris Kleiman come out and said, we're going to run Avery Johnson less this year. And I was so confused because I was like, wait a minute. He's your best offensive weapon, and his best offensive weapon is running the ball, and he's not going to run the ball. So I'm only going to pick you to go 8-4 because you're not going to do what you do best on offense. But I thought they'll lose a couple games early, and they'll figure out, okay, we're not the same if Avery don't run. But I was right in the fact that they lost a couple games early, but then for whatever reason, after that happened, they still didn't run Avery Johnson. And I'm still clueless as to why your best weapon on offense is the quarterback run game, but you take it out of the playbook. Makes no sense. So the head coach stuck to his guns. They ran him a lot less, and they didn't win. So if Avery Johnson's back next year and Chris Kleiman's back next year, I have a feeling they're going to run the quarterback a lot more. And Hunter, I'm glad you told me I was right. I thought that they made five altogether, but I was not sure. Hey there, Patrick. Glad to have you here. And it's your birthday. Well, happy birthday, Patrick. It's right at midnight on the East Coast. So if you're on the East Coast, then apparently Sunday's your birthday. But if you're anywhere besides the East Coast, then your birthday is on Saturday. So happy birthday to you, Patrick. Now, Wake Forest, I picked them to go 7-5, and they went 8-4. And I even said in my video that, most people had Wake Forest picked to go 4-8 maybe. But I thought their head coach is probably the most underrated coach in America, which with the job he did this year at Wake Forest, he'll no longer be underrated. But I thought he was a winning coach. He's won everywhere he's been. He'll win at Wake Forest. And they had a couple of teams on their schedule that everybody else had them picked to lose. And I just didn't think those teams are very good. So I had them winning those games. So I was right on Wake Forest and being much better than everybody thought they would be. But they were even better than I thought they would be. Duke, I picked to go 8-4, and Duke went 7-5. They were exactly what I thought they'd be, except for I didn't expect them to lose the non-conference game to UConn. That's probably the only game that they lost that I had them winning, but UConn turned out to be really, really good. But Duke is about what I thought they would have been. Really good on offense, terrible on defense. North Carolina, I picked 6-6, and they went 4-8. I thought for sure, even though it was Bill Belichick's first season coaching college football, that as long as he's been around, he would have figured out how to get the most out of his players and team. And I thought, well, they'll have a bad start, but they'll have a strong finish and they'll get to 6-6. And it just didn't happen. Florida State was right where I thought they'd be. Sure, Patrick, you can say whatever you'd like to say. Hopefully it's not bad, because I don't use vulgar language, but I can't help what other people use. So hopefully whatever you want to say, it won't be anything bad. And Patrick, I promise you, you don't want to hear me sing. If I start singing, I would lose every view and every sub that I've ever had in the history of this channel. You don't want me to sing. I promise you. Florida State, I picked 6-6, and the only thing I had wrong on Florida State was I thought they'd beat Florida. They were right where I thought they'd be, but Florida was one of the games I had them winning because Florida's not very good, but they laid a complete egg against Florida. But Florida State was right where I thought they'd be. Your mom died and your dad in a car crash. So, Patrick, I hate to hear that. That is terrible to hear. And, man, I will definitely be praying for you. That is something awful, awful, awful to hear. And Florida, I picked to go 6-6, but they were even worse than I thought they'd be. I've mentioned this a couple times the last couple of weeks. This Florida team this year was about as bad as the Jim McElwain years and the Ron Zook years. This team was just awful. Kendall, thank you for being here. I think it's the first time I've seen your name in the comments section. If it's your first time being here, for whatever reason made you stop by the channel tonight, thank you very much. And no, I do not eat chitlins. My wife eats them on occasion, but not here. She eats them at her mama's house because those things smell absolutely hideous, and I just can't take the smell, let alone eat them. And Patrick, you just keep breaking bad news on me. Tell me something good, Patrick. Chesley, glad to have you here on this late Saturday night or early Sunday morning, depending on when you watch the video and where you are. And Chesley, I always miss seeing your comments in the comment section. And I remember, I think the very first time you were on here, you told me what your name actually was. But Chesley, I got to be honest, I forgot what you told me. So instead of you continuing to tell me what it is, I'll just call you Chesley. And if you come on here on a regular basis, I'll probably remember it. But I do remember that it was not Chesley. And I remember your name, Chesley, because not just because it's your name in the comments section, but also there was a guy a long, long time ago I worked with named Chesley, and I thought, well, that's a very unique name. I've never heard that name in my life. And I think I already did say happy birthday to you, Patrick. If I didn't, I apologize, but I think I did. Illinois, I said would go 9-3, and they went 8-4, so they were right where I thought they'd be. A lot of people thought they were a fringe playoff team. I didn't see that. I think Brett Bielema was a good coach, but I didn't think they were a playoff team, and they were not. LSU, I picked 10-2, and they went 7-5, and they're probably the team that on my list I'm the most confused about because their offense was so good in 2024. Good night, Chesley. Glad to have you here. As always, Elena. Well, Elena or Chesley, whatever you like being called, thank you very much for being here and come back on a regular basis. But they're the most confusing because they had one of the best offense in the country in 2024, and they brought back almost all the same skill players this year, and their offense was terrible the whole year. And Garrett Nussmeier was a Heisman candidate last year, and he came back this year, and according to some people, he's going to be a first round NFL draft pick, and he still might be, but he was a Heisman contender before the season started, and he just looked pitiful all year. And LSU kept saying the man was healthy, but yet he played like absolute dog doo doo. And then they fired Brian Kelly, and most teams that go through a coaching change get some kind of a spark and at least play better for a couple of weeks. They've been worse since they fired Brian Kelly. So I don't have any idea what's going on in Baton Rouge, but they were definitely a hard team to judge this year. And Tennessee, I picked to go 9-3, and they went 8-4. And I would have been right on the money with them with my predictions. But one of the wins I had them getting was Vanderbilt, and I think Vanderbilt is better than what everybody thought they would be. So I had Tennessee going 8-3 into their last game, which they were. I just thought they would beat Vanderbilt. So they were right where I thought they would be. And then West Virginia, if you recall my video on them, I even said in the video that they're not an 8-4 team, but I had them going 8-4 because I was high on Rich Rodriguez because I knew the man could coach, and I thought he would get the best out of his talent and somehow find a way to get to 8 wins. And I think he did get the best out of his talent, but that's just not an 8-win roster. Now, they did play better after they changed quarterbacks, but I had them going 8-4, and they went 4-8. And then Oklahoma State, I was wrong on, but they were so bad last year. I just didn't see a way they could be that bad 2 straight years, but I was wrong. They were worse this year than they were last year. I said they'd somehow get to 5 wins. They did not. They went 1-11. And then Alabama, I had 9-3, and they went 10-2. So I was basically right on with them. And the funny part was, I had them going 9-3, but then they lost to Florida State, who was terrible. So of course, after they lost that game, I was like, man, I had Bama going 9-3. They lost to Florida State. There ain't no way that team gets to 9 wins. But I discussed a few weeks back that the reason why that happened was it was Gus Malzahn's first game calling plays for Florida State, and it was Castellano's first game playing quarterback for Florida State. So Alabama had no film on the quarterback at that school or the offensive coordinator at that school. So Bama didn't know what to expect, and Florida State came out, and by the time Bama figured them out, it was too late. But the weird thing about Alabama was, they go 10-2, and they could not run the ball all year long, and they couldn't stop the run all year long. And typically, most of the time, if you can't run the ball and you can't stop the run, you're not very good. But it's worked for them. And Hunter and Patrick, I guess you guys are going back and forth, but can we not do that? Because this is supposed to be a chat about either life in general or whatever my topic is, and not a chat for two guys to just go back and forth. So let's please not do that. And South Carolina, I picked to go 7-5, and I know a few Gamecock fans personally, and they told me that I was crazy. There's no way that team is only 7-5, and I said, you know what? They're not going better than 7-5 because they're not good enough to be Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia. They lost their best 8 defensive players. You're South Carolina. You're not going to reload. You're going to rebuild. Your defense is going to take a hit, and it did. So that's why I had them going 7-5, but they were even worse than I thought they would be. And you want to purchase my fluids separately or all mixed together. You don't do anything weird. I don't have any fluids for sale. Super need, but I appreciate you wanting to buy them if I had them. And Patrick, I'm not going to sing to you. I think I've told you that already. You don't want me to sing. Go find somebody that can sing and get them to sing for you. You don't want to hear me sing. But I didn't see any way the Gamecocks win more than 7 games. You don't lose your best 8 players on defense and come back and not take a step back. So I had them going 7-5, which was a step back from 9-3 last year. But they were worse than I thought, going 4-8. Sellers didn't improve at all this year. And I know that Mike Shula was a terrible coordinator, but I don't think it was all Shula. I think it was the fact that, last year in 24, people didn't know what to expect on him. But then you had a whole off season to watch film and catch up on some of the things he was doing. But folks are saying now that if he's going to the NFL, he needs to transfer because he's not getting to be the best player he can be at South Carolina. So we'll find out whether or not he does transfer. And I have not, Patrick. Funny you asked me that because I had a wrestling show tonight, and the guys backstage before the show were talking about different TV shows, and one of them got to talking about, I believe, Game of Thrones, and I told them I've never watched that, and they gave me a look like I was crazy, and I said I've never watched Stranger Things either. So it's funny you asked that, Patrick, but there are very few TV shows that I watch outside of sports stuff, but if I do, it's going to be a 30-minute comedy or interviews with different wrestlers and things like that on YouTube. I don't watch shows like Game of Thrones and Stranger Things because to me, they're pretty much the same thing as weekly episodic TV shows or daily shows like soap operas where you have to watch them every day because every episode ties together. And I stay so busy, I would end up being 4 or 5 months behind and I would never have time to get caught up. So I just don't start. They're just not my cup of tea. And I don't know who Mike and Dustin are. And the last team I'll talk about is Clemson. And I'm still pretty sure I'm forgetting 3 teams, but I don't know who they are. So all I can do is discuss the 17 that I remember. But Clemson I was wrong on, but everybody in the country was wrong on them because everybody had them either as a playoff team or a fringe playoff team. Hey, Danielle, glad to have you here. But it looked like for a while they weren't even going to be a bowl team. But they do end up winning their last 4 games, which you have to give Dabo credit for because if you're Clemson or any other team and come out of the gates a top 5 team or top 10 team and everybody has you winning your conference and everybody has you going to the playoffs and everybody has you either winning the national title or, at least making it there, and then you start out 3-5, most teams would just say, forget it, piss on it, I'm done. But Clemson didn't. They won their last 4 games, and not one player on the team announced they were transferring. Nobody quit. Nobody foregone the rest of the season. So that just tells you what kind of program Dabo has in Clemson. And Patrick, that's the kind of thing you can't ask because there are a lot of people, many, many, many people, that'll tell you they're a Christian. But saying you're a Christian don't make you a Christian. But yes, Patrick. Hey, Patricia. Glad to have you here, Patricia. I think it's the first time I've seen your name in the comment section. If it's your first time being here for whatever reason, you decided to stop by the channel tonight, thank you for being here. And feel free to give the video a like, a thumbs up. If you have not subscribed, please do so. And share the video on all social media platforms. And hey there, Crunch OG. Glad to have you here. And Crunch, I think it's the first time I've seen your name. Oh, it is your first time here. I was just fixing to say that. Well, Crunch, whatever your actual name is, it does not matter. I will call you Crunch because that's all I know you as. Thank you very much for stopping by tonight. And for whatever reason made you stop by the channel, thank you for doing so. And feel free to give the video a like, a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And share the video on all social media platforms, and tell your friends and tell your family about the channel. And Patricia, thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. And Hunter and Crunch and Patricia and all of you first timers, I'm normally not on here this late at night. I try to do most of my videos between 7:30 Eastern time and 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. But tonight, there was football teams that I was waiting to finish their game. And then there was a couple that I just tried to think of who they were to add them on the video, and I could not think of them. But normally I'm between 7:30 p.m. and 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's not normally after midnight on the East Coast when I'm on here. But I was hoping that since it was a Saturday night, people would still be up, and they are, because I've got a lot of you first timers in the chat room tonight, and I appreciate that. But Clemson, I picked to go 11-1 because I thought, they're 9-3 last year, and the bad part of last year was, their defense was terrible, and I thought when they fired the coordinator, so the defense will get better, and you brought back your quarterback. You brought back all of your best receivers. You brought back your kicker, and you brought back almost all your offensive lines. How can you not get better? And for whatever reason, the team just didn't gel. And by the time they started gelling, the season was already over with. Hey there, Nemo. Glad to have you here. And I've never heard of the Hobbit. Have no clue what that is. But the team just didn't gel together this year for whatever reason. And by the time they did, the season was over with. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think, hey there, Dwight. Glad to have you here. This year, I think the main problem was, even though LSU was a non-conference game, most people had Clemson going either 12-0 or 11-1 and automatically a playoff team. And I feel like, even though since LSU was not a conference game, it didn't matter. I think Clemson thought they were going 12-0, and when they lost to LSU and they already played one game and got one loss, that it just took the wind out of their sails, and it just destroyed the whole team and destroyed the chemistry. And by the time they recovered from it, it was too late. I think had they beat LSU, they'd have probably went 11-1 or 10-2 at the worst. And I think that just destroyed everything about the team. And by the time they got it back, it was too late. Hey there, Unreal. Glad to have you here. And hey there, 3286. Glad to have you here. Hey there, Dwight. Glad to have you. I think it's your first time being here as well. Dwight, if so, for whatever reason made you stop by the channel tonight, thank you very much. Tell your friends, tell your family about the channel, and make sure you subscribe. Hey there, Fabulous. Glad to have you here. So that's my recap of all the teams I talked about before the season. I usually come on here. It's usually mid-March, maybe late March, when I come on here and I start doing my predictions for the upcoming season. And I don't do 100. There's no point in doing that. But I usually come on here and do one a week, maybe two a week, all the way up until the season starts. And I try not to do teams that we know are going to be in the playoffs. That's why I didn't do Ohio State. I didn't do Oregon. I didn't do Georgia because I think everybody knew those were playoff teams. And if you're automatically a playoff team, it don't matter if you're 10-2 or 12-0, you're in the playoffs. And I'm not going to do somebody that we know before the season starts they're going to be 1-11. Nobody cares about them. I try to find the 25 or 30 teams that are either going to be fringe playoff teams or fringe bowl teams to see if they're going to be as good as expected, or I find somebody like a Wake Forest who's picked to go 3-9 or 4-8 and see if they're actually going to be that bad. That's usually what I try to do, and I usually get up to around 20 teams. I did this year. I just didn't write them down, so I could only think of 17. There's 3 that I just cannot think of. But any thoughts on any of this, please feel free to let me know. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day in here. What do you call perfume without a fragrance? Nonsense. And that does it for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.